Why were you in my office today?
Are you seriously asking me why I was in my husband's office? Why did you marry me if you're not proud of me? You won't even touch me.
She stood at the edge of his world like a warning he refused to read. 2 years of silence, 2 years of cold shoulders and empty chairs at dinner tables meant for two. 2 years of Isabel swallowing her tears in marble bathrooms while her husband, Kim Jung-ho, Seoul's most feared corporate titan, slept in a separate wing of their penthouse and called it a marriage. Then the rival walked in, and everything Jung-ho thought he didn't want suddenly became the only thing he couldn't survive losing. Welcome to my space, besties. Like, share, subscribe, and stick around. What happens next is something neither of them sees coming. The morning it all unraveled began the way most mornings in the Kim household did, in silence so thick it had texture. Isabel sat at the long dining table, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't yet sipped from. The Seoul skyline stretched behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, gray and glittering, indifferent to the woman sitting perfectly still inside it. She'd stopped trying to fill the silence 2 months ago. Before that, she'd tried music, conversation, questions about his day. Every attempt had dissolved against the wall Kim Jung-ho put between them as naturally as breathing. She was 28 years old. She had cheekbones that caught the light and dark brown eyes that knew more than they let on. Her natural hair was pulled back from her face in a low bun, a few coils escaping at her temples. She was soft in all the ways society told women to be ashamed of, and she had spent 2 years in this penthouse learning that softness was not a flaw. It was the only part of herself she refused to let him take from her. Jung-ho walked through the dining room without stopping. He didn't look at her. He never did anymore. He was in a charcoal suit, his dark hair back, jaw clean-shaven, the kind of man who filled a room without trying. Tall, broad-shouldered, precise in every movement. He ran Kim Industries, Seoul's second-largest conglomerate, with the same cold efficiency he ran everything else. Business rivals feared him. Journalists couldn't get close enough to read him. Women across the city wanted him. His wife sat 10 feet away and he walked past her like furniture. The door closed behind him. Isabel set down the coffee mug. She'd made a decision last night, lying awake in the dark in their enormous bed with its enormous emptiness. She'd turned it over for hours, examined it from every angle. By the time the first light crept under the curtains, she was certain she was leaving, not dramatically, not with a scene, not with the tears she'd cried in private for so long they'd started to feel like a personality. She was leaving the way she'd arrived in this marriage, quietly, with her dignity intact, and her bags already half-packed in her mind. She had a meeting this morning. Her own. One that had nothing to do with Kim Jung-ho or his world or the contract marriage their families had, arranged 2 years ago for reasons that still felt more like business than fate. Isabel was a structural engineer, a genuinely excellent one. She'd graduated top of her cohort at Yonsei, built a name for herself at Park & Associates, and somehow ended up married to a man who had never once asked her a single question about any of it. She had projects, clients, a career that existed in a city that existed outside these penthouse walls. She picked up her coat, her bag, her professional armor, and she left. The offices of Shin Development Group occupied the 32nd floor of a glass tower in Gangnam, and Isabel arrived precisely on time, which was the only way she arrived anywhere. The meeting was about the Honggang Riverside Complex, a mixed-use development project that had stalled under 3 previous engineering firms. Isabel's company had been brought in to assess structural feasibility after a significant budget change altered the original load-bearing plans. She'd spent 3 weeks on the revised calculations. She knew them cold. What she didn't know was who else would be in the room. The conference room was modern, all clean lines and gray tones, and there were 6 people already seated when she walked in. She recognized 2 colleagues from Park & Associates. She recognized the Shin Development project lead, a compact man named Director Yoon. She did not recognize the man at the head of the table until he stood. He was almost as tall as Jung-ho. Almost. His build was leaner, his energy different. Open where Jung-ho was closed, warm where Jung-ho was arctic. He had a face that smiled easily, which already made him unlike any powerful man Isabel had recently known, and dark eyes that landed on her and stayed. "Miss Kim," Director Yoon said, "this is Ryu Song-min. He's the lead investor backing the Hongkong project." Ryu Song-min. She knew the name from the financial pages. The founder of RSM Capital, one of the fastest-growing private equity firms in Korea. 34. Self-made. Known for taking calculated risks on projects others walked away from, he extended his hand. "I've read your preliminary report," he said. "The cantilever redesign in Section C is the kind of thinking that makes me glad we changed firms." Isabel shook his hand. It was the only structurally sound option once the budget parameters shifted. "Exactly," he smiled. "No one else saw it. Please sit." It was a compliment delivered without performance, received without fuss. Isabel sat down and opened her folder and got to work, and for 3 hours she was exactly who she was when no one in her personal life was watching. Sharp, assured, the most technically precise person in the room. Ryu Song-min didn't look away from her once. She noticed. She filed it away. After the meeting, he caught her in the corridor. "Miss Kim." He fell into beside her naturally, unhurried. "I have a question about the load distribution in the East Wing. Not urgent. But if you have 20 minutes, I'd rather understand it now than find out it matters later." It was a reasonable request, professionally appropriate. Isabel had 20 minutes. They went to the coffee bar on the 31st floor, and he asked genuinely good questions. The kind that showed he'd actually read her report and understood enough of it to want to understand more. She answered. He listened, not the way powerful men usually listen to her, waiting for their turn to speak, but actually listened, eyes on her, coffee going cold between his hands. "You're remarkable at this," he said, when she finished explaining the East Wing calculations. "It's my job. I know plenty of people who do their job. You love it." She looked at him. "How can you tell?" "The way your whole face changes when you're explaining something you believe in." He said it matter-of-factly. No attempt to make it romantic, which somehow made it land more squarely than anything romantic could. "It's a good thing. Rare thing." Isabel gathered her papers. "Is there anything else about the East Wing?" "No." He paused. "Can I give you my direct number? In case questions come up on your end." It was still professional. She took the card. She didn't think about him again until she was in the elevator going down, and then she thought about him for longer than she meant to. Jung-ho was home when she got back. This was unusual. He was almost never home before 9. Isabel set her bag down in the entryway and found him in the study. Jacket removed, papers spread across the desk, a glass of whiskey untouched at his elbow. He looked up. For a moment, just a fraction of a moment, something moved across his face, something that might have been relief, or might have been recognition, or might have been nothing at all. Then it closed. "You were out late," he said. "I had a meeting, then follow-up." She didn't elaborate. He never asked her about her work, so she'd stopped offering it. He nodded, looked back at his papers. Isabel stood in the doorway of her own home feeling like a visitor and made a decision she'd been making in small increments for weeks. She was going to talk to a lawyer, this week, not next week, this week. She said goodnight. He didn't answer. 3 days passed. In those 3 days, Ryu Song-min called twice with project questions. Both calls were professional, direct, efficient. The second call ended with a brief silence and then, "You sound tired. I'm fine. Okay. No pressure. I'll let you go." She sat with the phone in her hand after the call ended and realized that in 2 years of marriage, Kim Jung-ho had never once noticed she sounded tired. The gala was Jung-ho's. He held it every year. The Kim Industries annual investor gala, Seoul's most attended corporate event of the autumn season. Isabel attended every year because she was his wife, and that was the only context in which he seemed to remember she existed. She wore the appropriate dress, smiled the appropriate smiles, and spent most of the evening being introduced to people who forgot her name immediately because the introductions was always, "This is my wife," with no follow-up, no context, no name. This year she wore deep burgundy. The dress was fitted at the top and flowed at the hem, and she'd spent exactly as much effort on herself as she always did, which was real effort, because Isabel believed in taking up space even when the person she'd married had spent 2 years trying to make her small. She was reaching for a glass of champagne at the bar when someone materialized beside her. "I didn't expect to see you here?" She turned. Ryu Song-min, in a black suit that fit him the way expensive things fit men who knew what they were worth. He looked genuinely pleased to see her, not performing it, just feeling it, which was still startling. "My husband hosts this every year," she said. Something shifted in his expression. "Quick, careful. Kim Young-ho is your husband." "Yes, a beat, I see." He absorbed this with the quiet steadiness she was starting to associate with him. "Then, does that mean I should stop asking you about the East Wing load calculations?" Despite herself, Isabel almost smiled. "The project is separate from my personal life." "Good." He accepted a glass of champagne for himself and turned to face the room beside her, a comfortable companion rather than a hovering presence. "Because the East Wing is genuinely concerning, and I need you to keep answering my calls." They stood side by side for a few minutes, and it was the most comfortable Isabel had felt at one of these galas in 2 years. Across the room, Kim Jung-ho was talking to a cluster of investors. He wasn't watching her. He never watched her at these events. She was furniture here too. The appropriate accessory arranged in the appropriate corner. Except that tonight, something made him turn. He turned the way a person turns when the back of their neck goes warm without warning. Instinct rather than intention. His gaze swept the room the way it always did, reading threats and opportunities simultaneously, and it landed on his wife. Standing at the bar, next to Ryu Song-min, laughing. He'd never seen her laugh at one of his galas. He realized with a jolt that landed somewhere behind his sternum, seen her laugh in his presence at all. Not recently. He tried to calculate when and couldn't. The laugh transformed her. Her whole face opened up, eyes bright, chin tilted slightly, one hand rising to press against her collarbone, the way people touch themselves when something hits them by surprise and delights them. She was the most beautiful thing in this room, and she was laughing with Ryu Song-min, and Jung-ho felt something he hadn't felt in so long. He didn't immediately recognize it. He felt it like a fist closing around his throat. He excused himself from the investors and crossed the room. "Jung-ho." Ryu Song-min was smooth, extending his hand, expression pleasant and neutral. "Good event, Song-min." Jung-ho shook the hand with the precise pressure of a man cataloging threats. His eyes moved to Isabel. "I see you've met my wife." "We've worked together," Isabel said. Her voice was calm, flatter than it had been 30 seconds ago. "He's the lead investor on the Honggang project." "I know what he is." Jung-ho's jaw was tight. He moved, not dramatically, not with a scene, but half a step so that he stood closer to Isabel than he had in months. An instinctive repositioning, territorial and probably unconscious. Isabel felt it. She didn't move toward him or away. "Your wife is saving that project," Ryu Song-min said, addressing Jung-ho with the pleasantness of a man who had nothing to hide and knew it. "The structural redesign she proposed is genuinely brilliant." Jung-ho looked at Isabel. "Is it?" Not a question, more like something occurring to him. "I should get back to my colleagues," Ryu Song-min said, and he was gracious about it. No victory in the exit. He touched Isabel's elbow lightly as he turned. "Professional, brief. I'll call about the East Wing revision Monday." He walked away. And Isabel stood side by side in the middle of his gala, closer than they'd been in weeks, and the silence between them was different from the usual silence. It had heat in it now. Something unsettled. You're working with Ryu Song-min, Young-ho said. Yes. Since when? 3 weeks. He looked at her profile. She wasn't looking at him. Her jaw was set with a quiet dignity that he noticed for the first time, really noticed, she wore constantly, like armor she'd been forced to make for herself because no one else was making it for her. You should have told me, he said. Isabel turned to look at him then, and whatever he'd expected, tears, apology, the soft compliance that 2 years had never actually taught her, was not what he got. Why? She said. You've never asked. She picked up her champagne and walked toward a group of women she recognized across the room, and Jung-ho stood exactly where she'd left him and couldn't move for a full 30 seconds. He was awake when she came to bed that night. He lay in the dark on his side of the enormous distance that masqueraded as a mattress, and he listened to the sounds of her moving through the bathroom. Water running, quiet movement, the specific soft sounds of a woman performing the ritual of undressing for sleep. And he tried to remember when he'd stopped paying attention to those sounds. He'd married Isabel because their families had arranged it, and because at 29, building an empire, he'd needed a certain kind of stability, and she'd been presented as a certain kind of solution. He hadn't been cold to her on purpose, at first. He'd just been occupied, focused, moving at the speed his ambitions required, which left very little room for the woman who had somehow become his wife before he'd decided he actually wanted one. He thought about the way she'd looked at him tonight, the flatness in her voice. You've never asked. He'd wanted to say something. He hadn't known what. She came out of the bathroom in a plain gray sleep shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders, and the sight of her hit him the way physical things sometimes did when you'd been ignoring them so long they got tired of being ignored. Hard and immediate and impossible to look away from. She got into bed on her side without looking at him. Isabel, he said. Good night, Young-ho. Her voice was quiet, but it was final, and he recognized the sound of a door closing. He lay in the dark for a long time after she fell asleep, staring at the ceiling, and the fist around his throat didn't loosen. The next week changed things. Not all at once, not dramatically, but the apartment had a different atmosphere in it, something charged and unstable, and Isabel felt it even as she went about her life. Work, project meetings, structural calculations, the careful architecture of a woman building an exit. She met with a family lawyer on a Wednesday. Quietly, professionally. She laid out the facts of her marriage with the same precision she brought to load-bearing calculations. 2 years, contractual arrangement, no children, separate finances, no demonstrated affection or partnership for at least 18 months. The lawyer listened, made notes, explained the process. Isabel thanked her and scheduled a follow-up. On Thursday, Ryu Song-min asked her to lunch. Professional context, the East Wing revision required in-person review of revised drawings. They went to a restaurant near the project site and spent 40 minutes on structural schematics and 20 minutes on other things. Where she'd studied, what had made her choose engineering, whether she'd grown up in Seoul. Nigeria, she said. Lagos. I came here for university. And stayed. I stayed. She turned her water glass in her hands. Seoul felt like mine after a while, does it still? She looked up. The question was careful, aware it had weight. I'm working on it, she said. He didn't push. He never pushed. It was one of the things she was beginning to catalog about him. The absence of pressure, the respect for space, the way he treated her intelligence as an assumption rather than a surprise. She got back to the office and found 3 missed calls from Jung-ho's personal number. Jung-ho never called her during the day. Not once in 2 years. She called back. He picked up on the first ring, which was also unprecedented. Are you free tonight? He said. For what? Dinner. I'll be home by 7. She stood in the corridor of her office building holding the phone and trying to parse what was happening. Why? A pause. We should talk. She almost said no. The exit plan was already forming. It's already sketched. She could feel the lawyer's business card in her wallet like a compass pointing toward a different life. Something in his voice was different, a thinness to it. Like the layer of control he wore so perfectly had developed a hairline fracture. "Okay," she said. 7. He was home at 6:55. She'd changed out of her work clothes and was standing at the kitchen island when she heard his key, and she felt something she didn't want to feel. A traitorous flicker of something that lived in the part of her that had once believed this. Marriage was going to be something real. He set down his briefcase, looked at her across the kitchen. He was still in his work suit, but he'd loosened the tie, which for Young Ho was the equivalent of arriving disheveled. "I ordered food," he said. "It should be here at 7:15. "Okay." He came to the kitchen island and stood on the other side of it, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two people who had shared a home and a last name and very little else for 2 years. "You're unhappy," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an apology. It was a statement of fact, delivered the way he delivered all facts. Direct, stripped of performance. "Yes," Isabel said. "He absorbed this. For how long, Jung Ho?" Her voice was steady. "I don't think that's really the right question." "What is the right question?" She looked at him for a long moment. At this man who was still somehow beautiful to her even after all the distance, still capable of making something in her chest do something complicated. "The right question is what you want to do about it." He came around the kitchen island. She didn't step back. He stopped close enough that she could see the faint tension in his jaw, the careful, controlled thing his eyes were doing, and he said, "I don't want you to leave." "Why not?" "Because." He stopped, started again. His hand rose, and then didn't complete the gesture, dropping back to his side. He looked frustrated in a way she'd never seen on him. Not the cold professional frustration she'd witnessed in glimpses, but something rawer. "I can't explain it, I just know I..." Another stop. "You've never tried to explain anything to me," Isabel said. "Not once. You married me, and then you went away inside yourself, and I've been alone in this apartment for 2 years. Her voice didn't waver. She'd rehearsed this, or something like it, in too many sleepless nights for it to waver now. "That's not something you fix with a dinner order. I know that. Do you?" Isabel. Her name in his mouth, in that voice, she'd heard it so rarely, spoken so intentionally, did something to her she resented. "I'm asking you for a chance." "To what?" "To be something I haven't been." The words seemed to cost him. She could see it. The man who controlled entire boardrooms struggling with 6 words. "Give me time, real time. I'll be present. I'll be." "Why now?" she said. "What changed tonight from every other night for 2 years?" He looked at her. The honest answer moved behind his eyes, and she watched him decide whether to say it. "Ryu Song-min," he said. The air in the kitchen shifted. "You're afraid of losing something you never tried to have," she said quietly. "That's not the same as wanting me." "Then let me prove the difference." The food arrived. They ate across from each other, for the first time in Isabel could not remember how long, not in comfortable silence, but in the charged, uncertain silence of two people standing at a crossroads with different maps. She didn't say yes to anything. She didn't say no, but she didn't call the lawyer back that week. He started coming home for dinner. Not every night. He was still Kim Jung-ho, still running an empire, still the man who treated his phone like an extra organ, but 3-4 nights a week, he was home by 7:30. He sat across from her. He ate. Sometimes he talked. Not easily, not fluently, but with effort, the way a man who had spent his whole life speaking only in boardroom languages tried to learn how to say something real. He asked her about the Hongkong project on a Tuesday night. She stared at him. "East Wing," he said. "You were explaining the load distribution to Seong-min at the gala. I didn't understand all of it. You want me to explain structural engineering to you. I want to understand your work." It was such a simple sentence, and it landed like something enormous. Isabel set down her fork and looked at him across the table and felt the ground shift slightly under the architecture of her exit plan. She explained the East Wing. He listened. He asked 2 follow-up questions that were unexpectedly perceptive, and she had to recalibrate her assumptions about what he'd actually absorbed from the gala conversation. "You're not bad at this," she said, meaning the listening. "I'm not bad at most things I try," he said. "I just don't try many things." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's the most self-aware thing you've said to me since we got married." "I know." Something moved in his eyes, something that might have been shame, or might have been something older and harder to name. "I'm aware of the irony." Ryu Seong-min called on a Friday afternoon to say the East Wing revision had been approved by the city's structural review board. "You should celebrate," he said. "That was 6 weeks of work." "I'll open a bottle of wine," Isabel said. "Let me take you to dinner." A pause. "Professional celebration. The whole team will be there." She hesitated. "Is that a problem?" His voice was careful. "No," she said. And then, "It's just complicated right now." "Ah." Another pause. Warmer. The husband. She didn't answer. "Isabel." And there was something gentle in his voice now, something with weight in it. "I want to be straightforward with you, because I think you deserve that. I think you're extraordinary. I've thought so since the first meeting. Whatever is happening in your life right now, I'm not going to pretend I feel differently about that. A breath, but I'll also respect whatever you need. Come to the dinner as a colleague. Don't come. Either way, the East Wing stands, and that's yours." She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. "I'll come." She came. The team dinner was exactly what he'd said. 8 people from the project, a restaurant near the Han River, good food, and professional warmth. Ryu Seong-min sat across from her rather than beside her and was exactly as appropriate as he'd promised. But at the end of the night, in the car park, he walked her to her car. "Thank you for the work you did," he said. "Thank you for the project." He looked at her in the cool night air, and the thing between them, the unnamed thing that had been building since the first conference room, was present and acknowledged between them in the silence. "If things were different," he said. "They're not." "No." He nodded. "Good night, Isabel." She drove home and sat in the underground car park of her building for 10 minutes before going up, trying to identify the feeling in her chest. It wasn't longing for him. It was something sadder than that. The recognition of what it felt like to be seen by someone, the contrast of it against 2 years of invisibility, the grief of what that contrast meant. She went upstairs. Jung-ho was awake, on the sofa, papers on his lap but not reading them. He looked at her when she came in. "How was dinner?" "Good. Project celebration." "A beat. With Seong-min?" "With the whole team." He set the papers aside. He looked at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize. The fracture in the control, the thing trying to get out. "Isabel," he said. She waited. "I know I'm too late." His voice was low. "I know I don't have any right to." He stopped, pressed his hand over his mouth for a moment, collected himself. "But I need you to know that I see you now, that I'm sorry. For the 2 years, for being exactly what you said I was." She stood in the entryway in her coat. "What do you want, Jung-ho?" she said. "Actually want. You. Quiet. Absolute. I want you." The apartment was very still. "Prove it," she said. Not as a challenge, not cruelty, just the only honest response she had. "Not with words. You're good with words when you choose to use them. Prove it with something that costs you something." She went to bed. He didn't follow. He stayed on the sofa all night, and in the morning she found a cold cup of tea on the coffee table that told her he'd still been there at 4 in the morning, working through something she hadn't witnessed. She didn't ask what it was. The call came on a Monday, 3 weeks after the gala. Isabel was at her desk when her phone rang. Not Jung-ho, not Seong-min, but an unknown number that turned out to belong to a man named Director Kang from the city's planning authority. He wanted to meet. Today, if possible, urgent matters related to the Honggang project. He was very sorry for the short notice. She went. The planning authority office was bureaucratic gray, low ceilings, the particular specific fluorescent lighting of government buildings worldwide. Director Kang was a small, nervous man who didn't meet her eyes, which should have been her first warning. He explained, circuitously and with much throat clearing, that a formal complaint had been lodged regarding the East Wing structural approval. Anonymous source claimed the revised load calculations had been falsified to cut costs. An official review would be launched within the week. Her professional license would be under examination. Isabel sat very still. "That is possible," she said. "The calculations are correct. I can show you every number. I'm sure you can." He still wasn't meeting her eyes. "But an official review is mandatory once a complaint is received. We have procedures." She walked out of the building into the gray Seoul afternoon and stood on the pavement and felt the particular cold nausea of someone watching their professional life. The thing she'd built, the thing she'd protected, the thing she'd kept entirely her own through 2 years of a marriage that had swallowed everything else. Come under attack. She called her company director first. Then she called Ryu Shang-min. He answered immediately. "I heard," he said. 20 minutes ago. Isabel, this is not a real complaint. Someone filed this to damage the project. Or to damage me." A pause. "I'm looking into it. I have people who can trace the filing." "Don't," her voice was sharp. "Don't do anything unofficial. I'll answer this through proper channels. The numbers are right and I can prove it. I know they're right, then let me fight it the right way." Silence. Then, "Okay." He trusted her judgment. She filed that away in the same careful place she kept everything about him. She drove home. Jung Ho's car was in the car park at 4 in the afternoon, which had never happened in 2 years. She went upstairs and found him in the entryway already, as if he'd heard her coming. "You know," she said, "Director Kang called me 20 minutes after you left his office." His voice was controlled, but there was an edge under it that she recognized as barely contained fury. "He called me because he knew who your husband was and thought I'd want to know a complaint had been made against my wife. And I want to know who filed it. I don't need you to." Isabel. He crossed the entryway in 2 steps and stood in front of her, and for the first time in 2 years she felt the full weight of Kim Young-ho's attention, not the distant, absent version, but all of it, directed entirely at her. "Someone is trying to destroy your career. Do not ask me to stand back and do nothing." She looked up at him. This close, she could see the controlled anger in his jaw, the precise way his hands weren't touching her because he was restraining himself from it. And underneath the anger, something else, something that looked like fear. "You're afraid," she said. "Yes. Of what? Of being too late." His voice dropped. "Of you walking out of this apartment and never walking back in. And all I'll have to show for it is 2 years of being exactly the wrong thing." The entryway felt very small. "I need to prove the calculations are clean," she said, because it was the practical thing. And practicality was the container she used when everything else threatened to spill. "That's what I need to focus on right now."
I know.
He stepped back, gave her space. "But I'm going to find out who filed that complaint." She didn't stop him. It took him 4 days. In those 4 days, Isabel submitted 60 pages of documented calculations to the Structural Review Board, appeared for a formal examination by 2 independent review engineers, and received, on the 4th day, a letter clearing her completely. The anonymous complaint had been reviewed and dismissed. Her license was untouched. The review engineers had also flagged in their report that the complaint appeared to have been constructed using falsified counter-calculations, suggesting someone with access to the original documents had deliberately misrepresented the numbers. They were recommending an investigation into the source of the falsification. She was reading the letter in the kitchen when Young-ho came home. He read it over her shoulder, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. She felt his breath release. A long, quiet exhale of relief he probably didn't mean to let her hear. "It's done," she said. "It was Han Dongjin." She turned. "Who?" "Deputy Director at Kim Industries." He's been in communication with the city planning department for 6 months. He's also, I've just discovered, been feeding project intelligence to one of Songmin's rival investors. Jung-ho's voice was flat, but his eyes were not. He used your calculations, documents he had access to because of who you're married to try to derail the Hong Kong project and embarrass you as collateral damage. Isabel put the letter down. He used my work as a weapon in a corporate war. Yes. Because of who I'm married to. Yes. He paused. I'm sorry. She looked at him. Is he gone? 20 minutes ago. Good. She turned back to the letter. Her hands were steadier than her chest was. Thank you for finding out. Isabel. His voice had changed. She turned again. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Stripped of the professional mask, stripped of the careful control, something underneath it that was raw and uncertain and very human. I want to start again. Jung-ho, not fix what we had. We didn't have anything. I want to start, from the beginning. I want to know who you are. His jaw moved. I know I don't have a right to ask that. But I'm asking. The kitchen was quiet. Why should I believe you? Not cruel, genuinely asking. Because I haven't slept properly in 3 weeks, he said. And the reason is that every time I try, I think about you leaving and it feels like something being cut out of me. He exhaled. I don't know what that is. I haven't felt it before. But it's real. She believed him. That was the problem. She could see it. The man who controlled every room he walked into, undone by something he hadn't planned for and couldn't manage away. I'm not ready to say yes to anything, she said carefully. I know, I need time. I know, and I need you to actually show up. Not because Seong-min is in the picture. Not from fear, because you want to. I want to, he said. That's the part I'm trying to show you. He stopped. I'm not good at this. I know you're not. She looked at him for a long moment. That's why it has to be real effort, not just presence. He nodded. Good night, Jung-ho, good night. She went to her room. She lay awake for a long time, and the question she kept turning over was not whether he meant it. She believed he did, but whether meaning it was enough, or whether it required her to unmake decisions she'd already half made about who she was going to let herself be again. She saw Ryu Seong-min at the project site 2 days later. He was walking the east wing with the construction site manager, hard hat slightly askew, looking like a man who actually enjoyed being on construction sites rather than just owning pieces of them. He saw her and his face opened into that easy smile. Clean bill of health, he said, meaning the review. Clean bill of health. She fell into step beside him as the site manager moved ahead. I heard you offered to go unofficial on the source investigation. You told me not to. I know. Thank you for listening. He glanced sideways at her. How are things? She knew what he was asking. Complicated, she said honestly. He was quiet for a moment, watching the steel skeleton of the east wing rise above them. For what it's worth. And I know it's not my place. He doesn't deserve you if he makes you feel the way I think you've been feeling. No one deserves anyone, she said. People either choose each other or they don't. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted. Recognition, and beneath it, the specific sadness of a man who sees clearly and accepts what he sees. He's choosing you now, Song-min said. Isn't he? She didn't answer immediately. The east wing rose above them. Load-bearing steel, exactly where she'd calculated it needed to be. He's trying, she said. That's different from choosing. Yes. She watched the workers above. I know. He nodded slowly. Then I hope you get what you deserve, Isabel Kim. He said her married name carefully, with the weight of a conclusion. I mean that without any agenda. She looked at him. I know you do. She paused. That's one of the things I genuinely appreciate about you. They walked the rest of the East Wing professionally, talked about the construction timeline, shook hands at the end with the clean finality of two people who had recognized what might have been and chosen mutually and without drama to let it stay unmade. She drove home with something lighter in her chest. Not happiness, not yet. but clarity. The night everything broke open started with a phone call at 11:15. Young-ho was already home. He was always home now. She'd adjusted her sense of the apartment to include him in it again. And she was in the study, reviewing project documents when his phone rang in, the living room, and she heard his voice shift into something low and dangerous. She came to the doorway. He was standing with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, the set of his shoulders communicating a specific kind of controlled alarm she'd never seen on him before. "When?" he said. And then, "Don't touch anything. I'm coming." He turned and saw her, and something crossed his face, the decision to tell her, immediate and apparently not difficult. "Han Dong-jun," he said, "the man I fired, he had connections I didn't fully map. There are people he worked with who are not going to accept what happened quietly." He paused. "There's a threat. Against you." She felt the cold settle in. "What kind of threat?" "The kind that requires you not to be alone tonight. Jung-ho. I'm not asking you to trust me emotionally. I'm asking you to let me keep you safe." His voice was controlled but urgent. "Please." She looked at him. The apartment felt suddenly, specifically different. The penthouse on the 38th floor, all that glass, the city spread out below. Exposed. "Okay," she said. He moved immediately. Phone calls, quiet, rapid instructions in Korean. The machine of his world engaged in a way she'd never seen directed toward her. 2 of his security team arrived within 20 minutes. The penthouse was assessed. She was moved to an interior room. Young-ho sat outside the door all night. She knew because she couldn't sleep. And at 2 in the morning she opened the door and found him there in the hallway. Suit jacket removed, sleeves rolled up, phone on his knee, awake. He looked up. "You should sleep," she said. "I'll sleep when I know you're safe." She leaned against the doorframe. In the half-dark hallway, the armor between them felt different. Not absent, but thinner, the way walls go in the small hours of the night when defenses cost more than people can afford. "Tell me something true," she said. He looked at her. "About what?" "About why you went away, in the marriage, why you just disappeared into yourself." A long silence. He looked at his hands. "My father," he said finally. He ran the company with his whole life. Everything in him went into the empire. There was nothing left for anyone else. My mother, I watched her disappear inside a marriage where she was necessary but not wanted. A function, not a person." He paused. "And I promised myself I would never do that to someone." Isabel was very still. And the way I decided to honor that was to not try at all." His voice was low, self-aware in a way that cost him. "If I didn't let you in, I couldn't hurt you the way he hurt her." That was the logic. "I understand how wrong it was. I can see it clearly now, and I couldn't see it then." "You hurt me anyway," she said. "I know. The absence was the hurt, Jung-ho. The silence was the hurt. I know." He met her eyes. "I spent 2 years convincing myself I was protecting you by staying away, and I was actually just terrified of being my father. Of being someone who loves imperfectly and causes damage anyway. A breath. You deserved someone who wasn't afraid of himself." She slid down the doorframe and sat on the floor of the hallway, and after a moment he shifted, so they were sitting side by side against the wall, with their shoulders almost touching in the dark. "Why did your family arrange this marriage?" she asked. "Really? My grandfather liked your family. Your father built his engineering firm from nothing. My grandfather respected that." A slight pause. "He told me you were the kind of woman who would make a man better. I thought that was an old man's sentiment." He tilted his head back against the wall. "He wasn't wrong. You didn't let me try." "No, I would have," she said quietly. "That's the thing I want you to understand. I came into this marriage wanting to try. I wasn't naive. I knew it was an arrangement, but I was willing to make something real out of it, and you just closed the door." His jaw tightened. She watched it. "I know. Knowing isn't enough." "No." He turned to look at her in the dark. "What is?" She thought about Seong-min saying that's different from choosing. She thought about the lawyer's business card still in her wallet. She thought about the east wing rising exactly where the calculations said it. Should, exactly where she'd put it. Choose me, she said. Not because you're scared of losing me. Not because someone else noticed me first. Choose me the way you'd choose anything you're building. Deliberately, with intention, knowing it's going to cost you. He looked at her for a long time in the dark hallway. I choose you, he said. Not quickly, not desperately. With the same weight, he would give a business decision he'd sat with until he was absolutely certain. Deliberate, irreversible, clear. I chose you when I crossed the gala and felt sick seeing you laugh with someone else. I chose you when I sat on the sofa all night after you told me to prove it. I choose you now. He paused. I need you to know that's not fear. It's the first thing in my life that I've wanted without being able to calculate why. She felt something loosen in her chest, something she'd been holding together for 2 years, braced for disappointment, beginning, carefully, with the precision of a structural engineer who understood exactly what a load-bearing thing was, to let go. Then show me, she said. Tomorrow, and after that. Every day, he said. They sat in the hallway until the sky outside started to pale. The threat from Han Dong-jun's associates was neutralized by morning, Jung-ho's people, and quietly, the intervention of a prosecutor's office tip that turned out to have come from one of Jung-ho's old university contacts. The specific men involved were in custody by noon. Isabel didn't ask for all the details. She understood that his world had edges she would always encounter from a slight distance. What she did ask about was the settlement. Dong-jun is cooperating, Jung-ho told her over coffee. Real coffee, this time, side-side, at the kitchen island instead of across the long table. He'll testify about the investor connections. The project survives. Good. She set down her mug. I want to be clear about something. He looked at her. I'm not staying in this marriage because of last night, or because of the threat or the rescue or any of it. She held his gaze. I'm considering staying because of you sitting in that hallway telling me the truth about your father. That's the thing, not the protection. Something in his face moved, relief, and something deeper than relief. Understood, he said. I need more of that, more truth. I'll give you more of that. And I need you to know my work. She tapped the project folder on the counter, not as a performance of interest. Actually know it. I want to. He paused. I'd like to see the site. She looked at him. The Hong Kong site? You've been working on it for 6 weeks. I'd like to see what you built. The word built landed correctly. She felt it. Saturday, she said. I'll take you Saturday. He proposed on the bridge. Not originally. She understood that. The original proposal had been a contract signing in a lawyer's office 2 years ago with their families present, and champagne poured after, but this one was different. They were standing on the pedestrian walkway over the Honggang. On a Saturday afternoon, the city spread in both directions, the Honggang Riverside Complex construction visible below them, her east wing recognizable from here if you knew what you were looking at. She'd been pointing out the structural elements. The cantilever spans, the load-bearing columns, the precise engineering of something that would stand for 50 years because she'd calculated it correctly. And Jung-ho had been listening with the full attention she was still getting used to him giving. He'd gone quiet. She'd turned to look at him and found him already looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. He reached into his jacket pocket. I had this remade, he said. The original was a family ring. You wore it for 2 years and I never asked if you wanted it. He opened the box. It was different from the original. Same quality, different design. Something that looked like it had been chosen for her specifically. Simpler, more precise. The kind of thing an engineer with a particular aesthetic might have chosen for herself. I described you to the jeweler, he said. He did the rest. She stared at it. I want to propose properly, Jung-ho said. His voice was steady, but she could see his pulse at his throat. To the woman I know now. Not the arrangement, not the contract. He paused. To you, Isabel. The engineer who sees load-bearing structures where other people see empty air. The woman who built an armor out of dignity and wore it so well I mistook it for distance. He paused again, swallowed. The woman who told me to prove it and made me understand that I'd never tried to prove anything that actually mattered before. She was not going to cry on a bridge over the Hongong. She pressed her lips together. Isabel, Isabel, he said, will you marry me? Properly this time. As a choice. Kim Jung-ho, she said when she trusted her voice. You are the most infuriating man I have ever met. I know. I spent 2 years being invisible in our home. I know, and you think one ring fixes that? No. He closed the box slightly, held her gaze. I think 50 years might fix it, if you'll give me 50 years to try. Below them, the Han River moved through Seoul the way it always had, steady, indifferent, ancient. The city hummed. The construction site of the Honggang Riverside Complex stood exactly where it should, load-bearing steel, holding up the promise of something new. Yes, she said. He put the ring on her finger. His hands were not completely steady, which she found she loved. The evidence of the cost, the proof that it mattered. He pulled her in and held her with a certainty he hadn't had 6 months ago, his arms around her like a structure that had been tested and had held. I love you, he said into her hair. I think I have been for a while. I just didn't have the language for it. She breathed him in. You have it now. I have it now, he agreed. 3 months later, on a Thursday morning that looked like any other Thursday morning, except that it wasn't, Isabel stood in their bathroom looking at the small digital result on the test in her hand and felt the particular, precise terror and wonder of a woman whose calculations have revealed something she didn't run the numbers for. She came out of the bathroom. Jung-ho was at the kitchen island in a white shirt, first coffee of the morning, reading something on his phone. He looked up when he heard her, read her face. He set down the phone. Isabel. She held up the test. He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps. He took the test from her hand and looked at it, and then looked at her, and his face did something she had never seen it do in all the time she had known him. It opened completely, every layer of control and professional armor simply absent, something underneath that was unguarded and luminous, and entirely his. He put his hands on either side of her face. You're not afraid? She asked. Terrified, he said, in the best way. He pressed his forehead to hers. You? The same. They stood in the kitchen of their apartment, the Seoul skyline enormous and indifferent beyond the windows, holding this new weight between them. The specific gravity of something irreversible and wanted. We're building something, he said. She laughed, and it was the laugh from the gala, full and real, the one he'd seen from across the room and couldn't stop thinking about. That's my language, she said. I've been learning your language. He kissed her forehead, then her temple, then the corner of her mouth. I'm going to keep learning it. You'd better, she said. We're going to need good structural foundations. He laughed, actually laughed, against her face, and it was the sound of a man who had finally, deliberately, at significant personal cost, walked through the door he'd been standing outside of for 2 years. She had the calculations. He had the commitment. The structure would hold. Below them, Seoul moved through its morning. The river, the towers, the construction cranes turning slowly against a pale November sky. And in a penthouse on the 38th floor, 2 people who had chosen each other stood in a kitchen that finally, for the first time, felt like a home. Some people learn to see you. Some people never do. Isabel was lucky enough to find out the difference before it was too late. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who deserves to be chosen. Deliberately, completely, for real. See you next time, besties.